The structure of the slide shows you basically what we'll be talking about. So firstly, I'd like to explain what is that. I would also say a couple of words why it matters, and then I will tell you how it works in relatively general terms, but so that you can understand how to actually implement this in your company if you're interested, if you like the use case. So what is that? Predicting resolution times. Well, essentially, it's building process mining and machine learning models that estimate when a given ticket, a given request, case, however you call it, will be resolved. That's it. That's a system that can be just a model, that can be with some kind of user interface on top of it, can be integrated into your service management systems. But this system, this AI system, will predict what is the resolution time. Why it matters? I mean, long story short, of course, everybody knows why resolution times matters, but to keep your SLAs in check, of course, to manage customer expectations, to give them maybe the information when you estimate this to be resolved, and also improving the customer satisfaction and the net promoter score. So this is why it matters. And the question could be, all right, Dennis, we know why it matters. You didn't have to tell us, but we would like to know how it works. So this is the little bit more technical part where it comes in, but I'm trying to keep it relatively high level so that everybody can understand the general structure, how it goes. So to implement such a use case, what would you need to do? You would need to get the data, extract the data from your customer service system. And I have listed a couple of those that I have worked with, like Zendesk, Salesforce for Services, and ServiceNow, as well as BMC Remedy. You need to get data out of them somehow. And depending on the system, it could be done in different ways. For instance, Salesforce has a pretty good API, application programming interface, that allows you to extract the data programmatically. You send specific requests, you get the data back. And through this API, you can get all of the data on your cases, for example. In BMC Remedy, there's also the opportunity to access the database directly. So in that kind of case, as far as I remember, the use, at least the one that I was working on, was the Microsoft Server SQL, and we just accessed the database. Then we did the replication of the database, and then we had the data from the tickets and the incidents of the customer. That's going to be the first step. And frankly, in data science, this is always one of the first steps. When you know the use case already, when you know what you want to do, this is the first step that you need to take, get the data. And the second step, what we did in that particular case, we modeled the customer service process, something that I have shown you on the previous slide in this kind of mock-up version of the presentation. We did that through transforming data and visualizing this data in a BI tool to see which steps are the most time-consuming, which steps cause the bottlenecks in the resolution times. And what we did next was to train a machine learning model to predict these steps that can delay ticket resolution. So you can see the modeling part was done in two different steps, so to say. So it wasn't that we just extracted the data and then started throwing machine learning and AI at the problem. No, we first did some explorative analysis. Well, general explorative analysis is a good idea. And we modeled a business process that the customer was following. And then we could see what are actually those steps that we need to take into our machine learning model. This was very helpful because we knew what actually is causing delays. So we knew how to predict those, and we knew how those process steps affect the final resolution times. Why I'm talking about that, about these two stages, because it's quite common in data science in general that you need to have a little bit experimental approach to what you're doing. Because in the beginning, we couldn't build a machine learning model because we just didn't know what to use as our target. We didn't know what is exactly the target that we want to model, because just taking the resolution time as one target was not very helpful. I mean, we tried that, but it was not very helpful for us. So we needed to understand which steps are actually creating these delays or making the resolution times shorter. Okay. The next use case is about urgency detection and ticket tagging. Those are similar topics, so I merged them together. So what has been done here? What is that? That's a machine learning, natural language processing model to detect the urgency of customer requests and tag those tickets based on their content, on the description of the issue that you have, as well as other parameters such as creation time, when actually the ticket went into the system, which kind of customer has submitted it, and so on and so forth, like any feature that you can imagine on a ticket. And why it matters? Well, very simple. You can decrease reassignments, you can prioritize requests, and hence also increase the customer satisfaction score and the NPS score. Why is that possible? Well, because otherwise you either have to just throw the tickets to everybody and let people choose, and this results in the fact that not every ticket lands with the best CSR to work on. Maybe because the CSR has too high utilization, for example. Maybe because the CSR has not worked on this kind of issues before. In any case, this may delay the process. This may increase reassignments if you, at some point, will discover that you need to change the CSR. How we did that? The process started in a similar way. Again, first you need to get the data. Extract it, as I mentioned, either through API or directly access the database. Then you need to classify your data, your tickets, into urgent and non-urgent cases. What that means, why I mentioned that, well, because depending on how you set up urgency, it may create some problems. Like I have seen clients where the urgency and prioritization was based on a set of conditional rules, basically, that were 10 or 12 years old. And because of that, they were not actually considering, not really considering like the modern technologies, like, for example, the fact that somebody would be accessing it from a mobile device. It was not absent from the system of the client, but it was not considered in the urgency rules. So because of that, you might need also to classify manually your tickets into urgent and non-urgent by looking at them again. Or well, your CSRs have to do that. This is called data labeling. This is not always needed, but often in machine learning and AI applications, this might be needed to get a good result. After you have labeled your data, what you can do, you can train a natural language processing model to understand and predict new cases based on the sentiment in the ticket description. And sentiment means basically the attitude of the customer, if they're happy, if they're angry, if they're patient or not. Essentially trying to understand a little bit better the human side. And when I say train an NLP model, it may sound simple. This is probably the most time-consuming part of the task. This is the actual AI part of the whole task where it's coming in, because natural language processing is the area that's advancing a lot right now. This prompt in the beginning about the unicorn in La Paz that I have shown you, this is an example of natural language processing model, natural language generation model in that particular case. And then when you have the understanding of the text, what you can also do, you can apply an additional machine learning model, so a second model, to predict new cases based on those features that I have mentioned: time of day, category, device, and some customer characteristics that you might have. Why two models? Well, because an NLP model would work on the text, on the description of the ticket, for example, and another additional machine learning model would work on more features that you have in the form of a table or data, for example. And you can combine those two to actually reach a final urgency score, for example. All right. The next example is about voice and call analyses. So what is that? It's an AI-based voice recognition tool that transcribes and analyzes calls between customers and CSRs. So why it's important, why it matters, because it helps understand how the customer's calls are going, if they're going well or not. So essentially the reviews that senior employees of your customer service department have to do can be automated to some extent. Let me tell you how it works. So first, you would need to integrate your call recordings. Of course, for that, you first need the call recordings in the first place, but assuming you have them, if you don't, start logging them. Of course, you need to warn your customer about that, but nevertheless, start logging the calls. And then you have to integrate the recordings into an analytical database or warehouse, because again, not a good idea to work on the raw data from the system. The next step that you need to do, you need to implement a speech-to-text solution. What it does, it translates the voice into the text. So something that I'm saying right now, you probably have seen this on your phone. You're saying something to the phone and it writes the text on the screen. This is this kind of speech-to-text solution that what you need to implement at scale in your company. Then what you probably need to do is to implement a sentiment analysis solution. As I mentioned, sentiment is about how happy, sad, or angry your customer is, and to understand what they're talking about. In the next step, you would need to train the system and adapt the performance of voice analysis. Why I mentioned this, although I didn't mention it before, because voice is generally more complex topic than just text, because you have more points of failure. So the system may not work perfectly in the beginning in the recognition of the voice in different accents, for example. If people are talking not in a very clear way, the system might have problems with that and you might need to retrain it to improve the performance. And then what has been done is the rollout to CSRs to help them track their checklist progress. So in the script that the CSR would have, you need to ask this, that, 1, 2, 3. This system would actually guide them and serve as a digital assistant that I mentioned in the beginning, would guide them and tell them which questions they have asked already, which they still have to ask, kind of support them in guiding the customer through the call. Okay, this one is upsell prediction, is very important use case, of course. It's an AI-based prediction tool that identifies potential for new data plans, for new smartphones, and so on. I'm talking, of course, about a telecom use case right now. Why it matters, of course, it generates new revenue, as clear as that. And more importantly, for people who are involved and employed in the customer service department, it can transform your CS department into a profit center instead of cost center, as I was mentioning in the beginning. How do you do that? Well, you need to get data from the chat system or email or whatever, where you're talking to your customers. You need to integrate this data with the CRM data that you have. So again, CRM would be different kinds of system. It's not BMC Remedy, ServiceNow, and so on. It could be Salesforce, for example, or HubSpot, or SAP CRM, or whatever system you're using. You need to bring that data together. This is the step of data integration that we haven't mentioned so far too much. This is an important step of taking two different data sources and bringing them together. This is what data engineering does. This is something that you need to keep in mind. In most of the projects, you would need to do some kind of data integration that is being done by a data engineer. All right. In the next step, you would need to train an NLP model to understand customers' journey stage, their buying propensity based on the chat, based on kind of words they're mentioning, some kind of, could be some kind of keywords, could be some kind of hints that the customer is giving in their speech. And you can train the model to identify optimal contract and device packages for this customer. Well, imagine the customer is complaining that my data plan is not enough, or they're complaining, hey, my data plan ran out, I don't know what to do. What system could do is suggest them, well, hey, why don't you book a new data plan? Some proactive, I mean, it's a simple example, of course, but some proactive steps that the system can take to help your customer reach a better service, first of all, and you, of course, to create a new revenue potential. All right. I hope it's been clear. Now we're going to the last use case for this presentation, which is the chatbot. Chatbot for better response times. I'm pretty sure many of you have heard about chatbots. This was and still is a big topic, sometimes a hype topic, a very interesting topic because it combines really important customer success functions and pretty advanced AI technology. So what it is an intelligent chat assistant that can handle some of the customer questions, requests, queries, and so on. Why it matters? Because the chatbots can lower waiting time, the first response time. They can respond outside office hours and lower call duration. How it works, I will give you a really short introduction because this is the transition slide, let's say, where we're slowly going to interview with Anna. So just real quick, it's going to be about the identifying chatbot skills, about designing dialogues and channels, and deploying chatbots in productive systems. This is a very interesting use case, and with that, I would say we'll transition to the interview with Anna. If you have more questions, write them in the Q&A. We'll answer them at the end. But now let's kick off the interview. I'm very happy, Anna, to welcome you here. Thanks for joining. Thanks for your time, and thanks for sharing your experience with us. So I would suggest that we kick off interview maybe with continuing the use case that I just started presenting. You know that I took use case from you. I just want to try to kind of make a nice transition. Hope it worked. So I would say, yeah, it would be great if you present the project a little bit, and then I will go on with the questions that I have prepared.
Of course, Denis. So thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar. It's a pleasure for me. So the case I'm gonna talk today about is the case of an online travel agency. This company is a German company, a successful company. They detected that their customer service had, I would say, okay customer satisfaction, but the costs were very high. So they were looking for a solution that would increase the customer satisfaction and at the same time lower the cost, which is more or less like a wonder, something very difficult to achieve. So they were looking at different technologies, and they thought that the implementation of a chatbot system could help them. And then we started this project. So the idea was that in certain situations, being those when the customer was waiting to be taken care of too long time in the call queue, or also in the queue of the chat customer service. That was one of the cases, or in out of service hours, a chatbot would try to help with the most frequently asked queries.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could start talking about the project, but yeah, so
Sure.
what we achieved with the project, sorry?
No, I was just saying, sure. I think you're going on pretty fine, because my first question was how did you identify the use cases, but you just started talking about that. So I think that's fine. Just keep going. Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so one of the important things to do was to identify which were the most frequently asked queries.
Mm-hmm.
And this exercise we did together with different stakeholders of the company, of course, customer service being one of the most important of them. And also, but at the same time, we had to also choose those queries that were also easy to process by the chatbot. And that was an exercise of identifying these queries, and also this would lead to the skills or the things that the chatbot was able to do.
And how did you identify those queries?
The queries, well, we took, well, of course, we took the feedback of the different departments, especially customer care, and we also use historic data of the customer care department.
Okay.
So this, based on my experience, I believe it's very, very important to have data, because somehow what you feel or what you think is going to be the most important, even if you are on a daily basis dealing with customers. Sometimes your impression can be can lead to mistakes. So it's really good to validate your impressions with data.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Great. You actually reminded me of one case when I was pretending to be a chatbot on the website of a company where I used to work, and I pretended to send out bot-like questions to see what actually customers are asking. I think your approach was much more scalable than the one that I took at the time. Great. It'll be interesting to see. You mentioned the dialogues, if I'm not mistaken, right? The chats. Can you tell a little bit more? How did you design those dialogues between the customer and the chatbot?
Yeah, sure. So for the dialogues, we work together with the customer service department. We took also the scripts that they were using both in calls, so to answering customers, and also in the chats, because they had also a chat customer service. And and then we had to analyze those scripts and adapting them to the chatbot. It's very important when you define a chatbot system, the design of the chatbot and the design of these conversations, because depending on the way you formulate the questions, it might be a too difficult problem from the point of view of artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, I mean, there are like some principles of designing chatbots quite well established, like, for instance, avoid open questions, because if you ask your customer, what would you like, or how can I help you, you might get everything, you might get just anything, and probably things that you are not able to answer, or you have to answer something funny or something like super generic, because actually you cannot help on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point, because I think important to understand chatbots should improve the customer satisfaction, but in the cases when it's like too broad and they don't understand the domain, the person can actually get frustrated by talking to the chatbot.
Yeah, exactly. So, and this leads to another principle of design, which mm-hmm. is like, if the chatbot, for instance, after 2 attempts, the third attempt should hand over to a real agency, because otherwise it's going to lead to frustration. Or, for instance, a survey after the end of the conversation with the chatbot, not to see if the chatbot was really helpful, because otherwise you have to fine-tune the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And which channels have you used the bots on?
Yes, so the way of in terms of customer journey, what we did was to analyze the normal journeys and then introduce the chatbots. The system worked in a way that if in the case, for instance, of out of service hours, the customer would get an SMS and then with a link, and then the customer could open the chatbot either on Facebook or WhatsApp. And these were the two initial channels in which the chatbot were implemented. Okay. So Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp.
Okay. And is it easy to add, for example, a new channel such as email, for example, to that mix already?
Email. So another channel that was considered was SMS. It's always possible to add a new channel, but what it has to be considered also is the possibilities of the channel. So because then the conversation has to be adapted to the possibilities of the channel. So the first channel we implemented was Facebook, which has a button interface, so the customer could eventually either type or choose buttons with the options. If you go to WhatsApp, then you have to adapt this interface, because you don't have buttons, and then you have to include options A, B, C, for instance. And then if you add another channel, actually most of the system you can kind of like use, but there's also some modifications and some training that has to be done.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Great. Do you have, you mentioned a couple of times the design rules for the chatbots. Are there many of those rules, or are there more specific ones that we need to follow? Like the first one was not to give open questions, right? Are there a lot of these rules for the chatbot design?
Yes, there's a lot of books and a lot of a lot has been written about the pillars of successful system. So designing, I mean, taking the time, as in many other IT systems, taking the time to really design the system properly is crucial for a successful chatbot, which is always challenging because, of course, you always have like pressure to deliver something, but also a chatbot system can be delivered in phases, and it's one of the, maybe, I don't know, I wouldn't call it design, but development methodology that is very much worth to be used, is to do it also in phases and do like real tests with real customers to see how the chatbot is understood and fine-tune.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But yes, I mean, there's a lot of theory about design. But there are some rules that are like the most important rules, and following those, so you have good chances that the chatbot is going to be useful and accepted and also successful at the end.
Clear, Anna. Okay, cool. That was a lot of information, I guess. Thanks for the intro to chatbot design and sharing your experience. I hope it was useful for the audience to see how it actually works in a bit more detail, the difficulties that sometimes occur in chatbot projects, and where and how it can be deployed. Thanks for the interview, Anna. I enjoyed it. With that being said, I see we're already quite low on time. So I would suggest we keep going. There are just a couple of slides, dear audience, so don't worry, it's going to be just a couple of minutes more. So thanks, Anna. We'll keep going. So yeah, ask us questions, of course. And the next steps. You can say, okay, Anna, great, interesting. We know now how to implement the chatbot. You can say, hey, Dennis, okay, we know we need process mining, we need machine learning systems. So what is next? How do we proceed? Well, there are a couple of things still left on the table. About some of them, we want to talk in the next webinar that will take place on May the 20th. So this Wednesday, together with Mercedes, we will dive into the AI technologies. Today with Anna, we just mentioned briefly some of them, just so you know that they exist. In the next webinar on Wednesday, Mercedes and I will present you in more detail which kind of IT systems you can or should use, which kind of APIs, which kind of libraries, and so on you can use to implement your AI systems, chatbots, and basically everything that you want to have in your customer service process. With that being said, there is still one more thing for you, and this thing is the homework. So the difficult part about webinars is that we're sitting here on this side of the screen and we're talking to you, dear participants, but we do not really see that much feedback. There is a one-way conversation, so to say. At the same time, we really would like you to get the value out of webinar. And to support that, we decided to give you a little kind of homework. And there are 3 steps to complete this homework. The first step is to identify top 3 problems in your customer service department. Maybe you're head of customer service, maybe you're the CFO, whatever your position. If you're working in customer service and you know what you need to do and which problems you have, just write them down. Just take a piece of paper, write down 3 problems. Second step, try to apply AI use cases at those problems. Those that we have mentioned today, that we discussed so many times, resolution time predictions, chatbots, voice analysis and calls, upsells predictions, and so on. Try to apply those use cases at your problems. See if you can find some kind of fit. And
this links to a bit my question, right? Which is which of these list of use cases were the most important? And you said, well, that depends on your companies.
Yeah, exactly.
And what you're asking to the audience is, please make the exercise. Think which ones you think are the major levers for either the NPS or the return on investment, and based on that, we can basically help you to assess what are the feasibility of those cases, right?
Exactly. Write them down, see how we can apply AI to change them, and send me over an email. I will give you a short assessment, a short feasibility assessment of those use cases, if they actually fit and how they can fit. With that, you will be able to actually see where it fits and where it can be applied to your organization, which is the most important thing at the end of the day. So with that being said, thanks for your attention. This is our group. Yep. Now we will quickly jump into the questions. I know we're low on time. Dear participants, if you can still stay, please let me have a look, let us all have a look through the questions and see what we can answer.
Just before jumping to the questions, let me share my screen, because I'd like also to show. So if I can share my screen. Let's see if I do it properly. Oh, here it is. So now we can answer 2 or 3 questions, right? But it's always a system that is not scalable. And I would like you to introduce a part that we have in the web, where you can easily post a question to the community, and the community, including Dennis, will ask, right? So I also encourage all the participants afterwards to go to the platform, post it there. What are your thinkings, your thoughts about the webinar of today, and we all will try to respond to that, right? Sorry, Dennis, that was my point.
Sure. On this platform, we already actually started. A couple of days ago, I posted the question about if somebody has a questions to the webinar, and there have been some. Some of them we covered today, some of them we'll cover in the next webinars as well. So let me jump real quick to the questions in our chat right now. Again, dear participants, I hope you still have time. If not, we'll follow up already later on with the emails, but just to quickly catch up, the opinions about customer service. What it is. Customer service, explore how to solve complex customers' problems in an easy and remote way. Great definition. It encompasses what actually happens in the process, I think. Another idea is customer service is fulfilling customer needs with the aim of monetizing the interaction. This is an important thing, I think, finding in the context of what I was talking about, transforming the customer service from a cost center into a profit center. I think that kind of corresponds to that one, trying to monetize the interaction. Also, upsales predictions are playing good with this definition. Another definition, customer service is an exchange of information in a particular context between 2 parties that involves the need from one party and a solution from another. That's an interesting kind of way to understand this. Also sounds a little bit like Q&A sections that we have right now. So you might imagine that we're also doing some kind of customer service for you in terms of AI and chatbots. All right, customer service addresses problems that have with the organization's products and services. Customer service removes frictions. Yeah, totally agree. Customer service is the human touch when resolving a customer issue. That's an interesting point. Actually, I think, Salome, you mean here the difference between help pages and knowledge bases. The customer service is a more lively interaction. That's at least what I think about it. Okay. I think that's it. Okay, let me, wait 1 second. There is also, There's also more, sorry. Customer process is a business process which aims to assure the service is well provided, the SLA is guaranteed, and the customer satisfaction, loyalty is continuously improved. Yeah. The question now the definition, the question, can AI run customer call monitoring and evaluation? Can it identify issues or low quality responses by CSR? I think it's related to the question that I've mentioned about voice calls, analytics, and so on. The short answer is yes, there are possibilities. These solutions are usually not perfect. They will not be able to replace your review process completely, but what they can do, they can augment this process, and they can make it faster and more scalable so that you don't check your calls, let's say, once a month with a sample of 10, but you check 90% of all of the calls with your AI solution. That's something that is different in the terms of scalability. Okay. The question is, oh no, it's a definition. Customer service is an experience. A group of activities that cover any interaction with the customer to inform and manage its requests. The question is if we're going to share the link to the use cases. I think you mean the presentation. As far as I know, Pau, will make a presentation available, right? Question to me from Enrique. Dennis, after implementing the AI solutions you presented, have they drastically improved customer satisfaction? Was it worth the investment, the effort? I'm trying to get a feeling for when to invest in AI solutions or not. Well, the short answer is also yes, because, for instance, the resolution times, I have worked on the case where we improved them 25%, if I'm not mistaken. And this is huge improvement. This is something between the customer needs to wait an hour or 40 minutes on average. And for many of the solutions, you can automate this part as well. So the first interaction will be much more smoother. In terms of monetary calculation, it's a bit difficult for customer service. Again, why this kind of transition from cost center to profit center is important. It's often hard to calculate the exact revenue that can be attributed to customer service. So it's hard to say, is it worth investment in terms of money, because it's harder to calculate. But in terms of drastic improvement of customer satisfaction, yeah, it is possible, and this can happen. Okay. Willie is writing, thanks for the webinar. Interesting to get an update about current AI use cases. I'm looking forward to an optimized and automated customer service as a customer, better, more efficient approach for our first, second, and third levels of support and the next webinar. Well, as a customer, I'm also looking for a better service, of course, and sometimes you can notice actually if the company has a good chatbot and they invested time in it, because you can actually solve your problem with it. That's the main thing. In the next webinar, we're not going to be talking a lot about differences in levels of support. In the next webinar, we're going to be talking about technology, how to implement those use cases that we discussed today. And in the third webinar, we'll be talking about methodology and the process. So like, how do you do it step by step? Today, we quickly mentioned it in the use case part. In the third webinar, there will be more detailed description how to drive an AI project, basically. Okay. Paulo says, okay. Thank you for the next webinar. Okay. Thank you, Paulo, for the nice feedback. I think we're done with the questions, more or less. Maybe I missed one or two. If I missed something, you can go to the platform that Pau has mentioned on Outvise poll. You can ask the questions. We'll be monitoring them and trying to answer if you have more. So with that being said, I want to thank you, everybody, for your attention, for your time, for your questions, and see you on Wednesday.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dennis, for all the webinar. I think has been super interesting, very promising, all what you can do in customer service. And now we touch the reality right next Wednesday, which are what are technologies that will support all these use cases.